The fallout tonight after the eruption in the Oval and brand new comments from the president, topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight.
I want anybody that's going to make peace, if he's capable of making peace, which he may or may not be, but I want somebody that's going to make peace. Again, he doesn't have the cards. When we sign up, he's got all of the cards. That doesn't mean he can fight. He's got to stop the fighting, stop the death.
President Trump, moments ago, outside the White House, responding to that wild meeting inside the West Wing with the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky earlier today. They got along for about 40 minutes or so, and then came among the most surreal Oval Office scenes we have ever witnessed. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the center of it all here in Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. So here is what we are going to do tonight. We are going to play the roughly 5-minute exchange so you can see it for yourself. It started with the Vice President, J.D. Vance, touting President Trump's vision of diplomacy as they see it. Zelensky then asked Vance if he could ask him a question. Vance said yes, of course. Zelensky then rolled through recent history of Vladimir Putin and Russian aggression. And then came this.
What kind of diplomacy, J.D., you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yeah, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Count one.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
Feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing cards.
Serious.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war,
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble.
Can I answer?
Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet.
You haven't been alone.
In this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and your men are brave, but they had to use our military.
What about
if you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, he has.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Just say thank you.
Said a lot of
Accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
I understand, sir.
I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards. You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. You're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look. If you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
With guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me. That wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person. That was with Obama.
It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question to Mr. Vice President. I'm sorry.
It's going to be a tough deal to make because the attitudes have to change.
All right. And from there, 3 more minutes. One more question and nothing else from Zelensky. NewsNation is told shortly after the cameras left, the National Security Advisor Michael Waltz and the Secretary of State Marco Rubio told the Ukrainian leader it was time to leave. A White House official saying Zelensky was kicked out. Zelensky then seen here, entering a government vehicle outside the West Wing without an escort from President Trump. The scheduled press conference canceled. The minerals deal not signed, scrapped for the moment. The president then posting on social media saying, quote, he disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he's ready for peace. Zelensky writing a post thanking the president, the United States Congress, and the American people, ending with, quote, Ukraine needs just and lasting peace, and we are working for exactly that. With me tonight, Julia Manchester, national political reporter for The Hill, Chris Steyerwalt, host of The Hill, Sunday senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Hello to you both. Hello. Did we witness something today? And President Trump making comments just moments ago, Julia, saying of Zelensky, he overplayed his hand. He just wants to fight.
It's pretty remarkable to see this end, really a historic week for President Trump and his administration. Zelensky was the 3rd European leader he met with. The first 2 leaders, Macron from France and Starmer from the UK, obviously had Ukraine top of mind. I thought it was interesting yesterday, President Trump seemingly backing off some of his past rhetoric on Zelensky, calling him a dictator, essentially saying, well, I didn't call him a dictator.
It's because they thought they were going to sign this minerals deal today, right? And that's kind of how Trump operates, whether you like it or not. And there's, of course, opinions about how he handled it. Right. But they were set up for this minerals deal, and that didn't happen after that.
It clearly didn't happen. Instead, we got this huge blowout in the Oval Office, and it's, being received very warmly by Russia. You have Russian leaders, including former President Dmitry Medvedev, praising this on social media publicly. So certainly, a dire mood for Ukraine right now.
So what comes next, Chris? Because the president was asked just a little while ago if he was considering cutting off military aid. He said, it doesn't matter what I'm considering, which is the classic Trump, all options are on the table.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens, right?
So there are 2 factions predominantly inside the Republican Party right now. There are the people like Waltz, Rubio, and others who believe that letting Russia get away with invading its neighbors is probably bad for the long-term peace and security of the United States, and that Russia has to be checked up, and that if anything, Joe Biden was too timid in his support for Ukraine and trying to end the war on their behalf. That's what they used to criticize him for.
Right.
Then there's another faction, and that is the faction led by J.D. Vance, or that J.D. Vance is now the head of, which is it's time to cut them off. It's time to get out of there. Leave them to their own devices. We don't have a strategic interest in Ukraine. And what you saw today was that J.D. Vance saw his opportunity to push Trump away from a deal that all of those other folks who were sitting in that room, you look at Marco Rubio, he looked like a mudslide. Oh, my gosh, this is a disaster. J.D. Vance saw an opportunity to go in like a javelin missile and blow up the deal.
Watching Vance do that, again, whether you agree with it or not, Mike Pence never got anywhere close to anything like that. And there's this conversation, of course, because President Trump's a lame duck president, right, about who comes next. And I was watching that, and I thought to myself, man, J.D. Vance, and there's a wing of the party that's going to latch on to what he did.
J.D. Vance knew how to manipulate Trump in the moment, knew how to turn everything in the right direction, which is, aren't you offended, isn't this bad? And the craziest thing about this, how history goes, the reason that there was a reporter in the Oval Office, or a media figure in the Oval Office, who asked a belligerent question to Zelensky about why he doesn't wear a suit, is this guy who Marjorie Taylor dated or used to date or whatever. And he was there because earlier this week, the White House said, there's no pool anymore. We just pick who comes in for these events. So this is another example of we're living a lot of fast history, and small, seemingly unrelated things connect to bigger things later on.
All right. See you both later in the show. Appreciate it. All right. On top of everything else that we saw today, before things even started to boil over between the president and Zelensky, the White House kicked out a reporter from TASS. That is a Russian state media agency. The reporter was there to cover the meeting, and all of a sudden the White House was like, and reporters were saying, wait a minute, this is Russian state media here in the Oval Office. What's going on? Our Robert Sherman live on the North Lawn. Robert, the press secretary, right, had to get in there and get that person out.
Yeah, Blake, Chris brought up a very good point. The White House has been making a push recently to expand access to the Oval Office and let in different voices in media. But someone tried to exploit that today. A Russian state media reporter was able to get into the president's sit-down with Zelensky. Statement from the White House reads, quote, TASS was not on the approved list of media for today's pool. As soon as it came to the attention of the press office staff that he was in the Oval, he was escorted out by the press secretary. He was not on the approved list for the press conference, which, of course, did not happen. But this isn't the first time something like this has happened. You go back to 2017 under the president's first administration. His White House took heat after allowing a photographer in from the same agency to snap photos in the Oval Office while meeting with top Russian diplomats, including Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Officials at that time said they were misled into believing he was the official photographer for the foreign minister, though it's still not clear how exactly this happened or wasn't stopped today, according to the White House. Blake?
Robert Sherman, live for us at the White House in the middle of the action. Robert, thank you. All right, so still to come here on the Hill. What do you think it's like to be in the Oval Office in this moment? I can tell you, I can promise you, I've been fortunate enough to have gone in there for many of these big meetings. It is just simply different witnessing this in person. So what do you think it was like to be there in the room, feet away from Trump and Zelensky as all of this was playing out? We're speaking to one reporter who had a front row seat. What was it like from their vantage point? Other side of the break. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. We tell you every night, this is the center of politics. You're watching The Hill, and we're back and forth.
Managers, but we're different.
How so?
We're a fiduciary, obligated to act in our clients' best interest, so we don't sell any commission-based products.
Then how do you make money?
We have a simple management fee, structured so we do better when our clients do better.
The clients really come first then, huh?
Yes, we make them a top priority by getting to know their finances, family, health, lifestyle, and more.
Wow. Maybe we are different.
At Fisher Investments, we're clearly different.
Tuesday on NewsNation, the presidential address to Congress. Starting at 8/7 Central, Cuomo sets the stage for the remarks. Then Leland Vittert takes you through what's next for the nation. The presidential address to Congress. Special coverage begins Tuesday at 8/7 Central.
Not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
All right, so it all played out before the cameras broadcast for some 45 straight minutes, the last 10 of which you might have thought, oh my, what is going on right now? Or maybe you heard about it, picked up your phone, and then watched it for yourself right after. But there are only a small select group of reporters, print, television, photographers, who are allowed to go into the Oval Office on any given day. And on this day, what a day to be there. Joining me now is someone who was inside the room as all of this was playing out. Faith Pinu is the White House reporter, excuse me, for the LA Times. Faith, I bet you didn't think your Friday would be a little bit like this.
I know. It was a good day to have a strong breakfast this morning. It was
there you go.
Quite a day, and we're grateful it's Friday.
All right. So, look, you've been in the Oval before. When I used to cover the White House, I was in the Oval a bunch. It's different, right? It's just different being in the Oval when all of this is playing out and you're there next to world leaders. As this was happening, Faith, what were you thinking in real time watching all of this play out?
Yeah, well, I was on pool duty today, which means that I was responsible for sending out briefings and notes as the event was going on to the rest of the press corps across the world, right? And so as I was holding in one hand a phone recording what was going on, and then my other hand I was holding another phone trying to rapidly take notes and tell people this is crazy what's happening right here. And meanwhile in the back of my head just taking in this incredible scene as it was playing out live.
It's wild because that's exactly what happens. You're there, and you have the responsibility of alerting your colleagues, oh my gosh, this is going on, while also trying to figure out and listen to everything that's happening. So when they started going back and forth with each other in the moment, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, most of the meeting was fairly complimentary. Obviously,
the first 40 minutes.
President Trump was right for a long time. They were talking, and they had slight disagreements where, President Trump would say, oh, well, this happened, and President Zelensky would be like, oh, well, not quite like that. But, very mild compared to what was coming. And then the conversation really took a turn when Vice President J.D. Vance stepped in and he said, Mr. President, let me take this. And he turned to the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, and said, it's disrespectful for you to come in here to the Oval Office in the United States and disrespect President Trump without saying thank you, which to me came as kind of a surprise because throughout the conversation, President Zelensky had been saying thank you. His first words to President Trump in that meeting were, thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you for this invitation. So it was confusing what Vice President Vance was talking about, but then it just sort of snowballed from there. President Trump jumped in. President Zelensky at different points seemed to sort of try to calm the tone of the conversation and bring it back. But once it took off, it really took off. And then President Trump was saying, don't tell us how we're going to feel. And, you really need us. We hold all the cards, or you don't have any cards. And then there's this really incredible moment, I thought, where the Ukrainian President Zelensky said, I'm not playing cards. And so this all went on for about 10 minutes until finally President Trump was like, okay, we've had enough.
So one of when any foreign leader comes in, foreign media follows, right? It doesn't matter what country they represent, but you get foreign media. The media traveling with Zelensky today, I imagine they have a much different view of all this. I don't know if you got to speak to any of them or sort of what the feeling was.
Yeah, I didn't get to speak with Ukrainian journalists in particular, but I will say that as soon as we left the Oval Office, hearing from all of the foreign media around me, immediately calling back to their newsrooms and getting on the phone, and it was just like a torrent of foreign languages around me as everyone was trying to report back because, as you know, this has so much import, not just for Ukraine, but really for the rest of Europe and for the dynamic of world relations.
Faith Pinu had a front row seat. She's with the LA Times inside the Oval today. Hope you took some. Did you get some good pictures? Did you get some good video at least?
I did, yes. Thank you.
Hold on to it. I know you will. Faith, thanks for being with us tonight on a whirlwind day for you. Appreciate it. Faith Pinu, thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yep, of course. All right, still much more ahead here on the Hill. There is other news out there, including this. The Epstein files, the release now being called by some to be disappointing, overhyped. But is everything out there that should be out there? Why are fingers being pointed? One Republican lawmaker on the other side of the break who says he is on a mission to preserve all the files. Plus, did you hear what the governor's wife said today? There's a big battle brewing in Florida, and Casey DeSantis took to the microphones as well. Plus, we continue to stay on top of the big news here in Washington. Look at that sunset. Crazy, historic day and a beautiful night at that. Stay with us. The Academy Awards are this Sunday, and sure to be recognized, the two-time Oscar winner Gene Hackman, the Hollywood giant, found dead under mysterious circumstances along with his wife and their dog, all in separate rooms of their New Mexico home on Wednesday. The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office held a press conference just moments ago.
It should be noted there were no apparent signs of foul play. In the early hours of Thursday, February 27, 2025, Mr. Hackman and Ms. Arakawa were transported to the office of the medical investigator. An autopsy was performed. Initial findings noted no external trauma to either individual. The manner and cause of death has not been determined.
Still lots of questions here. Both Hackman and his wife tested negative for carbon monoxide inhalation. Gene Hackman, one of the all-time greats, was 95 years old. All right, well, it's 6:30 now here in Washington. America's new official language, the Pentagon giving transgender troops the boot, and where the vice president is headed as well. Our Hannah Brandt is here with what's happening on the Hill and more. Hello, Hannah.
Hi, Blake. A new executive order is in the works. There's President Trump, who's planning to designate English as the official language of the United States. That order is expected to give federal agencies the option to stop providing materials in other languages. Another shift in policy taking place over at the Pentagon, where a new memo is revealing that the Department of Defense is giving military branches just a few days to identify and remove transgender troops from the armed forces. Plus, VP Vance is on the move. He's sent to visit the U.S.-Mexico border on Wednesday and become the highest-ranking official in the administration to make the trek. And a battle brewing in the Sunshine State. Florida First Lady Casey DeSantis responding to a question about whether she's going to run for governor. She said, to quote the late, great Yogi Berra, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. If she does run, she would be going up against Congressman Byron Donalds, who has President Trump's endorsement. And that's what's happening on the Hill, Blake.
That race would be fascinating.
Oh, my gosh.
On so many levels. Not just because it's the governor's wife, but it's Casey DeSantis against the President Trump-backed selection of Byron Donalds, if it happens.
Absolutely. And just to see how red has Florida really gotten. We know it's shifted red in recent years, but just how MAGA is it?
It's interesting you say that because the governor was obviously talking up his wife today. He loves his wife. What husband wouldn't talk up their wife? But one of the things he said was, she's more conservative than I am. And it seems like they're teeing up a run there in the Republican primary.
He understands the dynamics very well.
He does indeed on a lot of levels. Hannah Brandt, thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, so there are still many questions tonight about the Jeffrey Epstein files. Last night, many of the documents released were heavily redacted or completely redacted, prompting some disappointment spread among Republicans, including the Congressman Thomas Massie, who posted on X saying, quote, "The fact that the Epstein files haven't yet been released demonstrates that the president doesn't yet have operational control of the DOJ and FBI. It could take a while to establish, or, as with his first term, it might never be established." Here with me now is the Republican congressman from the state of Tennessee, Congressman Andy Ogles. Congressman, thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. You know, keep in mind, Pam Bondi has only been in office for, a couple of weeks?
Couple of weeks. Kash Patel, just a few days.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it sets a baseline for what they have and what they're going to release in this initial tranche. But that's why I have the Pedo Act, which is Prevent Epstein Document Obliteration, obviously pedo for pedophile. But this is one of those things that the legislation would order these agencies, regardless of where they're at, to restore, to identify and to retain any records related to Jeffrey Epstein. And keep in mind, some agencies that may have records, say like the FAA, for example, may be outside the immediate reach of Pam Bondi. And so this starts the process and a mechanism by which she can have an investigation. And look, she was a pit bull when she was Attorney General of Florida. She is a pit bull now. She's going to do a great job. And so I think there's more to come, much more to come. And
all right, so you say,
in the end, I think we'll have justice, or at least some of these victims will have justice.
All right, so you say you think in the end, and you're right, Kash Patel's been on the job for 1 week. He was sworn in last Friday. Right. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, has been on the job a few weeks, maybe 2 weeks. But there is still a lot of disappointment from within many Republican circles about what was released last night, which was a little, not a lot.
Yeah, but again, I think it's important to have that baseline. It shows that they're trying to be transparent, and I totally get the frustration. I get it. I totally get it. But that being said, they've just gotten into the office, but I think there's an important point that Massey made is that under Trump's first term, you literally had departments and agencies and employees that did everything they could to undermine the president, and you're going to see this again in his current administration. That's why Schedule F is so important. So any individual that otherwise would have been untouchable, they can be fired. So I've got a bill.
Do you think there's a cover-up at the FBI?
Well, we do know that the branch in New York is holding or withholding files from Pam Bondi and from Kash Patel. And I would say I'm not going to tell Kash Patel what to do, but if he wants somebody to go with him, I'll go with him. Let's go get those files. Let's turn them over to the Attorney General and let's find out what's in there. But that being said, more will come forward. That's why I have this bill. That's why I'm going to push this bill to support Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and their pursuit of justice. Look, This guy was a creep. No one's going to deny that. He and everyone, all of his associates deserve to be in prison. And look, I think there's some tough questions that have to be asked. You look at the former President Bill Clinton. He was on the plane. He went to the island. Was he knowingly with minors? Was he knowingly having sex with minors?
There's questions about.
I'm not accusing him of that.
No, I know, but to be fair, there's questions about big names of all
lots of names. Lots of names
of all political stripes. Let me move you real quick to the big story here in Washington, which was what we witnessed today inside the Oval Office. On your side of the aisle is Senator Lindsey Graham, who afterwards came to the microphones outside of the West Wing and said this about Vladimir Zelensky.
He either needs to resign and send somebody over that we can do business with, or he needs to change.
Change or resign. That's coming from Lindsey Graham, which is notable. Do you think that should be the official position of the Trump administration?
Well, I'm not going to speak for the president, but look, art of the deal. He put Zelensky in his place. I think you'll see some sort of mining deal, a mineral deal come to pass over the weekend. We clearly have the upper hand. And look, we've been funding foreign countries in their wars and their skirmishes for decades, and we get screwed every time. And this is the opportunity for us to say, you know what? If we're going to be a partner with you in this endeavor, then we're truly going to be a partner. And so I think Zelensky overplayed his hand. I think he totally underestimated the resolve of President Trump. And Trump was right. They don't have the cards. We do. They need our help. We don't need their help. And so he's going to have to come to the table and, quite frankly, change his tune.
Congressman, I got to run, but why do you think there's going to be a minerals deal this weekend? Because the White House was touting it, and it was supposed to be signed today. They were saying, look, this is money for the taxpayer. And now that's not there.
Well, again, obviously Zelensky left without signing it. That is my understanding. And I think part of any further talks, whether it's with Zelensky or someone else, is going to be that deal in place or renegotiating, re-upping that deal. But we'll see what happens. But again, as I watched that unfold, my jaw just hit the floor. That was a huge error that Zelensky made. And I don't know who his advisors are. I don't know who prepped him for that meeting, but they need to be fired. And quite frankly, it'll be interesting to see if Zelensky survives back home.
We'll leave it here.
Politically speaking.
Politically speaking, yes. Andy Ogles is a Republican here on the Hill tonight. Thanks for being with us, sir. Hope you come on back again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Still to come here on the Hill. It is the story. And tonight, President Trump is reacting. What he is saying as he is aboard Air Force One right now down to South Florida. Full panel. Other side of the break when we return.
Tomorrow, a crackdown takes hold of an out-of-control border. NewsNation has exclusive access on the ground and in the air. Brian Enton and Ali Bradley host Crisis on the Border on the Front Lines. Tomorrow on NewsNation. Out-of-control border. NewsNation has exclusive access on the ground and in the air. Brian Enton and Ali Bradley host Crisis on the Border on the Front Lines. Tomorrow on NewsNation.
You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. It's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, you said thank you.
Today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
And they went back and forth for many minutes after that, following the unprecedented meeting between President Trump and Zelensky. Both world leaders would then take to social media with their reactions. The president saying that Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved, because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations. I don't want advantage, I want peace, the president said. Zelensky then went on to essentially thank the American public. Quote, "Thank you for your support. Thank you for this visit. Thank you to the President, Congress, and the American people. Ukraine needs just and lasting peace, and we are working exactly for that." Full panel here with me now. T.W. Arrighi, former communications aide to Senator Lindsey Graham. Julia Manchester, national political reporter for The Hill. Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And Dan Cannonen, Battleground States Director for the Biden-Harris campaigns. What a day you two picked to get in here, huh?
Good times.
Good slot. So
fun day.
We've heard a lot from Trump. We've heard a lot from Zelensky. There's also a lot of reaction. I don't think it's a surprise. Fairly partisan reaction on both sides to how both sides are viewing this. Play that real quick. We'll start there.
I have never been more proud of the president. I was very proud of J.D. Vance standing up for our country. We want to be helpful. What I saw in the Oval Office was disrespectful, and I don't know if we can ever do business with Zelensky again.
That was an abomination. What you watched was American power being destroyed in the world as everybody watches President Trump become a lapdog for a brutal dictator in Moscow.
Lindsey Graham is your old boss. If you've lost Lindsey Graham on a war front, have you lost the Republican Party? Where are you guys going to go from here?
Well, I think he's exactly right. This was an utter disaster from President Zelensky. Look, me nor Senator Graham are Putin lapdogs by any stretch of the imagination. Look, diplomacy is a dance. And he was not, President Zelensky was not seemingly aware of who his dance partner was. He was combative, he was argumentative, he was trying to relitigate certain things instead of kicking them to private negotiations, similar to what Emmanuel Macron did or Prime Minister Steinmeier did earlier this week, which was showing grace and showing thanks to the president, playing to his sort of personality traits. So this was tough. And look, here's the bit broader picture. There is no clear alternative for peace in Ukraine. The part of the mineral deal, which Senator Graham had a big hand in putting together, the reason for that was to get American interests in controversial areas and lands of Ukraine to sort of push a peace agreement and keep Russia at bay. This was a missed opportunity for Zelensky, and now his presidency and the future security of his country is in jeopardy. Murphy's right. This is an ambush. And it wasn't just today. Donald Trump called Volodymyr Zelensky, a dictator, while he heaps praise on Vladimir Putin, and consistently does this, not just in the last few months, but over the last several years. That's been his MO. It's the bloodiest war in Europe in 80 years. And you got a guy coming across the pond who has been defending his country with hundreds of thousands dead, hundreds of thousands of homes leveled. The existential threat for these Ukrainians is vital. And you can critique Zelensky's, taking the bait perhaps in that moment. But make no mistake, it was bait. It was a trap. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump attacked him in that and put him in a place that was untenable. I don't think he handled it wonderfully, obviously. But at the end of the day, Hank Paulson used to say this on behalf of the Chinese counterparts he worked with when he was Treasury Secretary, that the United States has the best allies. We have France. We've got Germany. We've got Canada. We've got Mexico. China has to deal with Russia and other despots to stay relevant. What we did today
was weaken our allies with those who we really want to be friends with and strengthen a dictator. And also, by the way, on that mineral front, strengthen China because we need those minerals or we're dependent upon China for the future of our economy.
So going forward, one of the big questions is, can this be put together? How does it get put together? Where do you go from here? The president was asked today if he would consider cutting off military aid to Ukraine. Here's what he said on the South Lawn.
I don't trust or distrust anybody. I just want to get a deal done. And if the deal happens, good. But you can't embolden somebody that does not have the cards, and all of a sudden that person says, oh, well, now I can keep fighting. We're not going to keep fighting. You're going to get the war done or let them go and see what happens. Let them fight it out.
Wrong soundbite there, but he said, I'm not talking about considering or not considering. He was basically saying we're going to keep all the options open.
Right. And I mean, that's got to be so worrisome to all of those Eastern Front countries like Poland, for example. We know that last week or the week before, the Polish president met with President Trump. He's an ally of his and dependent on NATO troops, wants U.S. troops in the region, probably, obviously, in Ukraine, not troops, but aid in Ukraine. So that's got to be, anxiety inducing to hear that for a number of these countries. And we're also seeing, countries across the board in Europe, Macron, Germany, et cetera, they're all coming out and condemning this. So Trump's creating a new situation.
Well, history, if we end up in another European land war, history will look back on this, and this will be another way station on the trip to catastrophe, right? And we'll tell a long story, and there will be lots of blame to spread around. But if we really end up in Dutch on this, if we end up in big trouble as it relates to what's going on in Europe, which we could, not today, but we could. If we do, we'll look back on this meeting as a pivot point where you say, how did it happen that the world fell apart? And we'll say, well, there was this meeting, right? There was this guy who was dating a congresswoman, asked him about his suit. And then J.D. Vance said this thing about the 2024 election, and everything went kablooey. And then after that, they couldn't get the deal done, and it was too dang bad.
I was fascinated. Dan and I were talking about this earlier. I'm curious to get your thoughts. Chris and I, we both talked about this at the top of the show. J.D. Vance there mixing it up in the middle, and it makes you wonder sort of what his role is going to be going forward, because Mike Pence never did that.
Yeah, two totally different personalities, first of all. Second of all, if you read much about the Trump White House in 1.0, it wasn't uncommon for Donald Trump to like to see other people step up and take it to world leaders. Senator Graham did it to President Erdogan in the White House about the Syria situation. But look, J.D. Vance has had a long-running critique about the Ukrainian government and the way they've handled this war, the way that they have treated U.S. aid. And Donald Trump, to the point of which, we hold all the cards, that is in part true. If we were to stop aid tomorrow, their war can't go on for much longer. And I think J.D. Vance's point has been, it has been a lot of take from the Ukrainians, and rightfully so. I am pro-Ukraine in this conflict. But he was making the point today that, again, to my original point, Zelensky played this very poorly and did not show the gratitude necessary and the grace necessary to open negotiations with a good, clean slate.
As someone who just ran a presidential campaign against J.D. Vance, what did you take away from what you saw from him today?
J.D. Vance is a role player. You said role. That's what he does. He has been the never-Trumper. He's been the bridge builder across, Appalachia to Democrats. Now he's playing this role where he is the lapdog and attack dog for Donald Trump. I do think of all the roles he plays, I actually don't trust anything he says at this point. But the role that I think is most natural to him is Yale collegiate debater. And to put him in that environment where he can kind of do that and spar, and he looks strong, that was a good look for him in terms of strength. Not so good in terms of our diplomacy.
All right. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Still to come on the other side of the break. Many people are saying this is the 5 best minutes of television.
Many people are saying. Some of the best people.
I work on this show all week long, like 10 hours a day. I know everything that's coming. This is what we call Friday Night Unfiltered. Other side of the break, Steyerwalt and I, the Hill team, putting together some of the best images of the week. Our thoughts, unfiltered. Other side.
Branding. I like it.
Wow.
Coming up next, a perspective on the Ukraine war that you may not have seen. A U.S. Army vet back here in America after fighting on the ground in Ukraine. So what is his reaction to what we witnessed in the Oval today? That's right ahead, 7 o'clock Eastern, right here on NewsNation. All right, Steyerwalt, back by popular demand. Friday Night Unfiltered. This is the one time where Chris and I, we do television. We have no idea what's coming. Our team picked some of the best images, stories, whatever, I don't know, from this week, and Chris and I react. So fire up the first one on Friday Night Unfiltered. What do we have here? Oh, so this stood out to me because President Trump did not escort Vladimir Zelensky out.
Yeah.
Normally, they would have the president walk the world leader in and walk him out, and that ain't Donald Trump.
And it was important for the White House to say they wanted it known that they kicked him out.
Yep.
It wasn't that he left before that they kicked him out. We threw him out.
For us little Washington insiders, that was a sign. Obviously, we knew it didn't go well, but once you saw that, you knew. All right, second image here on Friday night. There you go. The Epstein Files Phase 1. These were conservative commentators, social media influencers that got the Epstein files before everyone else earlier yesterday, right?
Yeah, well, there wasn't much to it, and this was a huge faceplant for Pam Bondi at the Department of Justice. They hyped up, they brought in these right-wing influencers, they did all this stuff, they said, we're going to blow the lid off of Epstein, and the people were bragging, everybody better run and hide when it comes out. And then they gave him a bunch of folders that said everything that had already been out. And then Pam Bondi afterwards says, I blame the Southern District of New York, and so the Epstein fanatics are not satisfied with what happened.
All right, next image here on Friday Night Unfiltered. Oh, I did my take on this the other day. This is the Congresswoman from Colorado. This was the budget framework vote. She gave birth on January 25th, Brittany Peterson, and flew into town with her 3-week-old child. And we highlighted this because you could, from my view, whether you think she made the right vote or wrong vote, it's not how she voted, it's how she voted. The fact that they don't allow mothers to proxy vote is absurd.
I'm fine with them not allowing proxy voting.
Really? Even for this?
As long as it is uniformly applied, right? I think it's perfectly fine to say that you have to be physically present in Congress to cast your vote in Congress, but there better not be any loopholes for anybody else.
Yeah.
If they made this lady be here, that's right.
Last image is the easy one. It is the best Sunday show in the business. Who you got coming up this weekend, Mike?
Well, we got Mike Rounds. We got Steve Horsford, Mike Rounds, Senator from South Dakota. Steve Horsford, Democrat from Nevada. We have some other stuff coming in. There's a lot of news this weekend. We'll be keeping track of it.